Hello, my name is Kwok Ng. I'm a researcher at the Department of Teacher Education, Turku Institute of Advanced Studies as a Collegium Fellow at the University of Turku. And here I'm presenting some of the work we've been doing in terms of scale development for digital gaming and physical activity relationships. This study is done from a team effort of researchers from UKK Institute, University of Uvascular, and also my dual affiliations at the University of Limerick in Ireland and Lithuanian Sports University. Our project website can be found on this web page. Feel free to have a look at it. So for a little bit of background, the physical activity relationship is a concept created from Pasi Koski in 2008 that described that there's the role of sport and physical activity play an important part of an individual's life. That being that a person who has multiple meanings with physical activity will have it appearing in their life more often, and therefore it is related to their amount of physical activity too. This activity was then extended to the digital gaming relationship, DGR, where Sokka, who just presented, had talked a little bit about how we can transfer the physical activity relationships to digital gaming relationships, and here it reflects the role of digital games and gaming in one's life, just in the same way that sport and physical activity would play in an individual's life too. The basis of these two relationship issues is that the stronger the perceived meaningfulness a person has, the individual is more likely to spend time on those activities related to that specific issue. For example, in physical activity for PAR and for gaming activity for DGR. Koski also wrote that the more important the meanings were found to be, the more likely the study participants were physically active. This came from a national representative sample from a national monitoring study of adolescents published in 2022, and that was found for boys and girls and older and younger adolescents. So with the help of use of PAR and DGR approaches, we can establish links between physical activity and digital gaming in the lives of adolescents. Now, this is really important because the physical activity guidelines from the WHO have outlined that there is a need to limit sedentary time, and we all know that much of digital gaming is played being sedentary, and also if we start looking at the 24 hours behaviors where gaming may influence the amount of sleep someone has, and sleep being a predictor also for health outcomes as well. So all in all, with everything all comprised together, and there could be a need to be able to understand how one type of behavior, physical activity, where the adolescents should do on average 60 minutes per day in a week, and then there is the limiting sedentary behavior, of which sedentary behavior may involve sitting, watching TV, playing computer games, also doing computing work, also doing school work and things like this. So this should be limited. Now in schools it's harder, especially for the older age group, but amongst the time outside of school, there is some kind of controllability that an individual may have in terms of regulating their physical activity levels, and also their sedentary time too. So the purpose of this study was to develop a set of novel scales that would reflect on both the DGR and the PAR, and looking at the ways that we could try to understand meaningfulness in these leisure time activities, which could then be later used for addressing issues like behavior change, where if you try to address ways for digital gaming and to enhance physical activity, to maybe counter some of the issues that arise from being sedentary too much, maybe compensated by being physically active, then it might be worthwhile to try and understand the meanings of both areas. Now, what do I mean by physical activity sometimes overbalancing the gaming? Well, we've seen some certainly epidemiological studies of adults whereby the amount of physical activity that someone does, there's a higher dosage amount, which leads to more protective factors towards chronic diseases, non-communicable diseases, and cancer, for example, cancers, diabetes, obesity. And then you look at the protectiveness of reducing sedentary time. The protectiveness of that reduction of sedentary time is not as powerful as spending more time being physically active. So all in all, if you replace the sedentary time with physical activity, you may start receiving more health benefits, particularly in the long term. So as such, these tools become finding tools that become reliable and valid ways to measure can also help inform health promotion strategies, because I don't think digital gaming is going away, and neither is physical activity, and that seems to be the direction that health promotion strategies are trying to work with in terms of limiting screen time and trying to promote physical activity. Limiting screen time has recently been produced to be reported by adolescents across Europe, as well as healthcare professionals, as well as researchers and policymakers, healthcare professionals and adolescents. They all agree upon sedentary time being an important factor to consider in terms of working with policies and research. Now, that was recently published from WHO. It's worthwhile to have a look into that as well, because behaviours, for example, smoking, are high on the agenda of policymakers, but they're not high on the agendas of adolescents. So here I'm going to just explain a little bit about the instrument development. What we did was we first of all had different phases of scale development, then we did some pilot testing, and then we did some analysis to produce the final scale. So I'll go through each of these step by step. So the first phase was to look at the literature, to have a look at what was covered in the studies in relation to different kind of areas of meaningfulness from the gaming perspective, as well as what was already available from physical activity. This was then produced, kind of categorized into conceptual items, and then fit under certain themes that you see on the left hand side. Here you can see 8 different dimensions. There's the area of fantasy, for example, the use of imagination, sense of joy and enjoyment, the experiences of success, the game specific attributes or sport specific attributes, for example, financial affordability to get equipment, mental health, for example, would be used in terms of forgetting worries, that it's a way to disconnect from the stresses in everyday life. Physical development was another dimension, such as improving your physical fitness, particularly in terms of sport, physical activity. Sociality was a recurring theme as well, a recurrent dimension. For example, playing together with friends, as well as the issue about learning and development, gaining new experiences and becoming a better player or esport athlete or or through sports. So in total, getting these 8 dimensions from the literature, there were about 44 items created across these dimensions, and then each of these areas were then examined a little bit further to try to deal with single concepts within items. What do I mean by that? I mean that if you had 2 constructs in the same wording which had been in place from the physical activity relationship scale, then we would see if there was conceptual overlap between the two, because when a person responds to a question, are they thinking about one concept or the other concept, or is it the combination of the two? Or is there a way that we can separate the 2 constructs, so they'll be answering more items, or whether there is the need to remove one of the 2 constructs to keep it straightforward and simple. So that then led to the 44 items. We then looked to refine the items because the literature is done in English language. The participants that we would be collecting data from would ultimately be in Finnish language. So there had to be several rounds of making sure it's clarity and conceptual precision for Finnish adolescents. The word-for-word translation is not always the best way. There is a need for not only the back translation process, but also then understanding the conceptual, contextual translation. And so we then once that was all done, we then did this bilingual consistency testing, and that's where we did the retest between English and Finnish, and making sure that the conceptual consistency was across the languages. And again, in terms of the single concept work, again, when we found out that there might be some conceptual overlaps, to see whether there was the need to split or reword to focus on single constructs to ensure as much reliability as possible. And then there is the preparation for pilot testing. So they were then refined for theoretically sound and ready for empirical testing with the high school students, which will be in the subsequent stage. So in this phase, we tried to recruit from a convenience sample, and this convenience sample yielded 176 students, of which then they were asked to complete the same questionnaire 3 weeks later on an online survey, and there were some absentees, hence the lower number, and some newcomers. The survey had the 88 items that we created using a 6-point Likert scale of meaningfulness, importance. So it was from not important at all to very important, and we chose a 6-point scale because we wanted to avoid a midpoint for the terms of meaningfulness, so we can find out and eventually analyze something which would say it is meaningful or it is not meaningful by using a cutoff in from the 2 sides. By using a 3-week test-retest interval, we try to ensure that any perceived changes in their relationships would not be affected from it being a 3-week interval, but also we didn't want to do it on the same day or a few days later in case these high school students would remember what they may have chosen, and then that could have led to a bias to the response of what their relationship was, rather than the actual sense of how they're feeling their relationship is, and for us to then test how reliable the instruments are. Eventually, when we had all the data matched together, we were left with 116 participants, and then the statistics used was through intracorrelation interclass correlation coefficients, ICCs, for the reliability analysis, and for the construct validity we use principal component analysis. So it should be PCA, not PCM, PCA, and we looked for the item loadings, sort for the highest amounts, and use Kwok alpha to find out how valid these constructs are held together. I should go back a step with the ICC. We try to see that from the literature it's supporting to say that if it is less than 0.5, then the item is not considered to be reliable enough. So we remove the items if they did not meet the reliability level. And then we proceed with the construct validity with only the items that were deemed to meet the reliability criteria. So here you can see some of the items that we removed from the 44 due to the fact that they were not reliable enough. And what you can see that from the left hand side, PAR represents from the physical activity, DGR is from the digital gaming. You can see that there was only one item that didn't meet the threshold for that, and the rest of them were from PAR. What's interesting is that the PAR scores were generally higher, so there's going to be more range possible, and whereas DGR the scores are lower, so there's less room for making changes in terms of the reliability. But also importantly, there were 4 of the 6 items from the joy and enjoyment subscale dimension, as you will, that were not reliable enough, and so we ended up removing that dimension. As time's pressing forwards, if you can just see this well enough, we ended up with 5 scales. From the original 8, we ended up having 5, and we found that there was reasonably good Kwok alpha, which is to say that they fitted quite nicely together to have different dimensions of competitiveness, social aspects, self-development, mental health, and functional features. And so when we started to look at these for DGR, you can see that the loadings were similar enough to the physical activity loadings, with all of them working quite nicely together, all above 0.7 with the final items. So once we've done that, with this, we made sure that this could then be used for future studies. So the limitations of this scale works was that we had a convenience sample that was used from the school in the southwest of Finland, limiting its overall generalizability of the scale development and the findings. The time between the surveys was 3 weeks, so we expect the changes in reliability score might be, we're not discounting, might be due to the behavior themselves. So for example, if they had a really all of a sudden got engaged into gaming, of course their relationship scores would change, and likewise if they did some physical activity and they got injured, they may have then changed their sense of relationship to physical activity. So as such, we do not account for these things because we don't know if these actually happen. But typically, 3-week window for this type of behavior research it has been quite typical, and we've seen that in the literature too. The measures cover only the meanings that were both relevant for gaming and physical activity. We are certain that there are a multitude of other meanings, and it would be literally impossible to measure all the different types of meanings that someone would have, that someone would relate to. It would be an endless scale that people would just spend forever potentially answering to. Hence we are limiting ourselves to this to make this into a manageable way and moving forward in terms of the potential behind this, which is the idea of measurement for understanding intervention effects from health promotions works. Which then leads to this, that what we can conclude is that we have validated instruments and it's crucial for studying adolescents' behaviours related to gaming and physical activity. They might help to uncover motivations behind these behaviours when you put the two together. Meanings is different from motivation research, but that is to say that there is some parts of the motivation in meanings, but not to say that all of meanings is leading to motivation. And in terms of health promotion, these can help to look at the strategies of individuals at an individual level, but also at a larger population level as well. And then there is the opportunity, when you have these scales that align to each other, you can start looking at the multidimensional nature for more research to develop understanding of activity, managing gaming behaviors, as well as this issue about the overall mental health of individuals that may be needing to limit their gaming activities or at least managing it in a way that is balanced with their physical activity as well as sleep. Okay, thank you very much, and I look forward to your comments. Apologies I cannot be there, but my colleague Miikka would be available.